why do they hate America? I didn't know. I didn't understand. And so that kind of lit a spark of curiosity. And I wanted to find out more about the world. In the past, I went to North Korea many times. I've had 19 trips there altogether. Well, the first time, of course, I felt like I had gone through a time capsule. I mean, just everything seems so different. I mean, to go to a place where they haven't had access to the outside internet, outside music, social media, the people are very sheltered from the outside influence.
So what inspired you to pursue this career, particularly in international reporting?
So the career inspiration came when I was a kid, during the Persian Gulf War, the first one. And I remember watching CNN's signal of the Scud missiles raining down on Baghdad. And I was still in elementary school. And I ran through my house and I told my parents, we're at war. Oh my gosh. And I was glued to the screen and the reporting by CNN correspondents. Hi.
สวัสดีค่ะ Will. So welcome to Citizen of the World and TNN Studio in Bangkok. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's beautiful here.
So I've heard that this is not the first time in Thailand. You've been here so many times, but not as many as you've been in North Korea.
Well, lately I would say I'm coming to Thailand more often than North Korea because they've had their borders closed since COVID. And I've been here in Thailand 3 times in the last year. Lucky me. But in the past, I went to North Korea many times. I've had 19 trips there altogether.
So what are your impressions, when you arrive in North Korea?
Well, the first time, of course, I felt like I had gone through a time capsule. I mean, just everything seems so different. I mean, to go to a place where they haven't had access to the outside internet, outside music, social media, the people are very sheltered from the outside influence. And that's exactly what their government wants, of course, because they want to control the information and the way that people are allowed to think. But there are other things about North Korea that are very charming. People do still use their cell phones. They just don't have access to the outside, but they have an intranet, an internal internet with a few hundred websites. And people have an innocence about them that you don't sometimes find in other places because, again, they just haven't had the flood of outside music and entertainment that we all are used to. But obviously it's a very difficult place to work for a journalist because the government minders are there trying to control what you can see, what you can talk about. And, we've never actually deleted any footage in North Korea. We've never agreed to delete any pictures that we've taken, but they certainly very heavily controlled where we were allowed to go film. So it's just something that you have to learn how to operate within their system. And I still believe that there's a value to going there as a journalist, even with the restrictions.
But you're not scared, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. Maybe you couldn't get out of North Korea for some reason.
I'm not scared. I always am aware that when you enter that country in particular, you hand your passport to your government officials and you don't get your passport back until you're ready to leave, you're ready to fly out at the airport. And usually when they arrest people in North Korea, and other countries as well, they will arrest you at the airport because that's when the government agency will know you have a flight, you're going to be there. So sometimes people, when they're arrested, they would check into their flight, and then as they're about to board their flight, they pull them away. So that was always the time for me after any assignment where I, hold my breath, a little bit nervous, right? You don't know. Our priority always is that we, me and my team get out safely. And so we just try to follow the law. And we report factually and accurately, but we follow the law because we want to go home. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to your, where you start this career, because I'm the journalist like you.
We're the same age.
Yeah, the same
Within
age.
a few months of each other.
Yes.
And I won't say what age.
We won't say the age.
We'll keep it.
Yeah. But actually, I know that this is the hard job. In terms of the working hours, the payment, or anything.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to pursue this career, particularly in international reporting?
So the career inspiration came when I was a kid, during the Persian Gulf War, the first one. And I remember watching CNN's signal of the Scud missiles raining down on Baghdad. And I was still in elementary school. And I ran through my house and I told my parents, we're at war. Oh my gosh. And I was glued to the screen and the reporting by CNN correspondents. And I also watched my local news as well. And I really admired the presenters on my local news. And so I decided at that age, still in elementary school, this is what I wanted to do. And I started making phone calls to local news presenters, asking if I could come for tours of the station. Some of them were very nice. Some of them were very rude. But the ones who were nice, I developed connections with and would go back to the station and visit. I ended up getting an internship while I was in school. So I started getting experience in newsrooms at a young age. And then I worked in American television for 15 years. When I was younger, I thought my dream would be to present a breakfast show, like to work in a local breakfast program. And I thought, I have a good personality to do cooking segment and, and light topics. And then I did a breakfast show for 5 years in Texas, which is in the southern United States. And I found that I was always a bit bored. And also I would toss to the reporters out in the field and they would be out in the middle of all the action. And I wanted to be there. So I actually told my boss at that station, I was the presenter for the #1 rated morning program. And I asked to be taken off the program and made a full-time reporter. And people thought I was crazy because obviously the anchor desk is a prestigious, kind of more glamorous job than running around and sweating in the dirt. But it was a great match for me. And I would say within 3 years of that, I was then joining CNN. I worked in Texas and then I worked in Colorado for 3 years because I knew I had to go to a bigger city to put together an audition tape for CNN. I flew myself to New York 2 or 3 times on my own dime. Basically just showed up at CNN office with my tape and said, hey, nobody recruited me. Nobody was looking for me. But I started, giving my business card, sending people examples of my work. And after a couple years, finally they relented and they say, well, why don't you fly into New York? We have a position that you can interview for. I thought, foolishly, I had so much confidence. I thought, okay, they're flying me. They're spending the money to fly me. I definitely have the job. So I walk in there like I already have the job. I found out later that they had like 12 people that they flew in. And one of the questions that Amy Antelis, who's one of our top executives at CNN, she said, look, we have a job opening for a correspondent in Chicago, and we have an opening in Tokyo. She said, which one you want? And without even thinking, I said, Tokyo. And she said, really? Why? I said, well, because I've been to Chicago. I had never been to Asia. I'd never seen Asia. I said, that sounds like an adventure. So apparently I was the only person that gave that answer. All the other candidates said they wanted Chicago. And so off I went. And I arrived here in Asia right when the Malaysian airliner MH370 went missing. So I dropped my suitcases at my apartment in Tokyo, and I didn't see it for like 2 months. I was out covering the missing airliner in Malaysia. So it was like right from the beginning, very busy.
So when you're based in Asia, you're supposed to travel around at Asia when there's the story, right?
All the time. Yeah.
So you've been so many places across this region. What are the most memorable experience or story for you?
There's so many. I mean, but I would think, obviously, if I were going to encapsulate one topic that I've covered that's been very memorable, of course, North Korea. To go into that country so many times and make contacts there and kind of deepen my understanding of that country. But I've had other stories too that have really touched my heart. For example, in China, in Beijing, there was a story where a baby had been abandoned in a sewer, okay, which is sadly not that unusual in Beijing. So as covering that story, we went to an orphanage, and there was a little boy at the orphanage named Jia who had no ability to use his legs, and he was rolling around on a skateboard, basically. But I felt a connection with this young man, and he was almost too old to be adopted. So he was almost going to be adopted, out of the orphanage into like a group home until he was old enough to maybe work, or maybe he would be institutionalized. This story about Jaja and a family in the United States, in Missouri, was able to adopt him after seeing the story and raising money for his adoption. And then I was able to go and visit Jaja, who's now in high school in the United States. So the family flew from America to China, adopted him. He now has the ability to walk with assisting devices. He plays basketball and football. He speaks perfect English. And I met this boy when he was on the orphanage floor in Beijing. And now he's got this family that loves him. He's like a star in this small town in the middle of the United States. So I just messaged him on Facebook like the other day, and he just say hi, and he speaks such good English now. So that story really touched my heart, and I wish that we could do more stories like that.
Yeah, it's very touching story. So now you're in Asia for many years.
Over 10.
Over 10.
Yeah.
And do you consider yourself as a global citizen? And what does it mean for you? I mean, personally.
I absolutely consider myself a global citizen, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because I think a lot of people they never leave their hometown or their home state or their home country. And I know for me, when I think back many years ago, even when I started working in journalism, there were things about the world that I didn't understand. For example, I was working at a television station when 9/11 happened, right? When the planes flew into the Twin Towers in New York. And even though I was already working as a journalist, I was only in my, maybe like 20 years, early 20s at that time. But I thought after it happened, I had this question, well, why did they hate America? I didn't know. I didn't understand. And so that kind of lit a spark of curiosity. And I wanted to find out more about the world. I had a job that allowed me to do some international reporting when I was a local reporter. I was based in Texas, which was very close to Mexico. So I'd travel over to Mexico and cover the drug cartels that were having a big turf war at that time, or I'd cover illegal immigration. And when I applied for the job at CNN, one of the things I told them is that I really enjoyed the challenge of arriving in a new country and having to figure out very quickly how things work and get the story. And even just last week, we at the very last minute decided that we would follow Vladimir Putin to Vietnam, to Hanoi. And I've only been there once before for the summit in Hanoi between former President Trump and Kim Jong-un, and that was 5 years ago. So with 1 day's notice, we got visas, packed, flew to Hanoi, and did a report about Vladimir Putin in Vietnam and had to find somebody that met with Vladimir Putin. We interviewed a man who had been in a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and we did all of this in the span of just a matter of hours on the ground in Vietnam. We have no bureau there. And it was so much fun. I mean, this is why I do what I do. I love that challenge of just arriving in a place and working, by the way, with very talented local journalists in every country where we visit. And it's my producer that I work with, Eric, and my cameraman, John. We'll work with a local journalist as well who can help us with their expertise to find people that we need to speak with. Our local journalist in Vietnam's name is Andy. So we wouldn't be able to do our job without the incredible and talented local journalists in places like Thailand. Although we do have a bureau here, we have Kocha, who's our producer here, and Mark, who's our cameraman here. But other places where we don't have a presence, we really lean heavily on the expertise of the local journalists, such as yourself, who obviously know the situation much better than us, and we are grateful for their hard work and their expertise, and we couldn't do our job without it.
And what have you learned every time that you land in other countries?
Well, one, it's just important to be respectful of whatever the system is in that country, whatever the cultures are in that country. You should never walk around as a global citizen with some attitude that you're somehow know more or are better than any place you visit, even if you don't understand, even if it's very different from what your beliefs are. You always need to find a way to understand and respect. And I think probably one of the most important things is to just be grateful. To be grateful no matter where you visit. Be grateful for the things in your life. Be grateful for the opportunity to experience other people and how they live their life. We meet people that are in very difficult situations sometimes. Be grateful for the opportunity to tell their story and make sure that you have empathy and compassion. It's really, really crucial because we all have something to learn from each other.
Yep. You said that the very nice word, empathy. And now we are facing the situation, in the world, so many conflicts, many hotspots, right? And you cover the stories. How do you find yourself to help promote, or encourage the peace or the empathy among the people during this period?
We have to understand each other's perspective. That's crucial. It's a scary time right now. I don't have children, but if I did, I would feel nervous about the future. You just don't know what's going to happen. The fact that, 2 Christmases ago, I was covering the war in Ukraine, which is still going. Last Christmas, I was covering the war in Israel, Gaza, which is still happening. I hope that next Christmas, it's not a war somewhere else, closer to home. But I think one thing that we learn from life is things can change and happen very quickly. We should do our best. We should try our best to make the world better. And the way that we can do that as journalists is to try to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, and we approach that responsibility with the care that it deserves, not to inflame or exacerbate or sensationalize, but to understand and communicate. And you never know, right? You never know if maybe somebody will hear that story and they might change their decision. We might never know if we have an impact or not. And sometimes it's easy to get cynical and to think, okay, I cover all these bad things, and yet bad things still keep happening. We'll never know, right? If somebody sees our report and maybe they change something, or maybe it's a child that sees the report and in the future they become a leader and that changes something.
Let's move to our job, the future in our job, journalism. With the rise of social media and fake news, misinformation, disinformation, how do you try to balance all these things?
Well, you and I grew up, we're children of the 80s, right?
Yes.
Not to tell people how old we are, but we grew up, we were the last generation to kind of have a childhood without the internet, and then we go to college and then we start to have the internet and cell phones and things. But we were lucky enough to have a childhood without having to worry about people taking a video and posting it on social media when we made a mistake. Things are very different now. I don't really pretend to understand this whole TikTok thing. I don't have a TikTok. I tried it for about 5 minutes at the beginning of the pandemic, and my boss basically was like, some people do TikTok really well, but you're not one of them. At the end of the day, I still believe there's a big role for journalism, and particularly journalism where it's a news source that has a series of steps in place to make sure that the information they're presenting is the truth and that it's accurate to the best of our ability to report it. That's why sometimes on CNN, there'll be a story that's spreading like wildfire on social media, and you won't see it on CNN. It's not because we're not aware of the story. We have teams of people that are constantly scanning every news source, social media, and everything else. So we're always aware right away. But the reason sometimes why we don't report things is because we're waiting to see if we can report it, if we can verify it. And we have a series of checks and fact checking and sourcing. Like your newsroom as well, right? Like you have to follow procedure before something can just become news. There's a lot of people that are putting information out there that's either deliberately misleading, or it's not fact checked and it's just rumor. So I think in this new world where we're flooded with information, there's a role for journalism, for trusted journalism, and it doesn't mean that everybody's going to believe it or trust it, because there's a huge segment, certainly in my own country, the United States, there's a huge segment of the population that believes the lies of our former president about the election being stolen from him and rigged, even though we've showed the facts that that's not the case, right? But there are millions of people who believe that. And they can watch TV channels and they can read information on social media that just reinforces their belief. There's nothing that we can do about that other than to try to be transparent and to do our very, very best to report the truth. And when we do make mistakes, because of course we do, we're only human, we own up to the mistake with transparency, and we correct it. And I just feel very inspired and motivated in this time, because I think it's more important than ever for there to be good journalism out there, especially for the existence of a democracy. People have to use information to make a vote.
Okay, so now we come to the last question. How do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Where are we going to see you? Which spot of the world?
I used to have, when I was 20, I made a plan, and I said, by age 40, and I'm now over 40, right? But by age 40, I have to be in this city doing this job, or I'll consider myself a failure, right? And then I turned 40 and I realized, what? The plan that I made when I was 20 doesn't work for what I want out of my life, right? I want to have a work-life balance. I don't want to necessarily, I devoted myself to my job completely at the expense of personal connection, at the expense of seeing my family more often, things that I think are really important to prioritize. I kind of cast aside with this laser focus on only journalism. And so now my goal is to have more of a work-life balance, because I think if your life is better, your work is also going to be better. So by allowing myself to change the plan that I made when I was 20, I can honestly tell you now that I have the same feeling at 40 something that I did when I was 20, which is where the world was kind of, I felt like the options were unlimited and I really didn't know, where am I going to live? What exactly am I going to be doing? I don't know. And the fact that I can say that at this point in my career, that I genuinely can say I don't have a plan because I just don't know. The business is changing so fast. Who knows what's going to happen in the world, in my own life. But I'm really excited to find out, and I'm just trying to take it day by day and enjoy every day and every moment because we just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring.
But actually, we always hope to see you around here again.
I would love to. Anytime they ask me to come to Thailand, I always say yes. I love it.
Thank you
love
so
the food,
much.
love the smiles, the aesthetic, everything.
Okay.
It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you
Thanks
too.
for having me on
Thank
your show.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.